Hey everyone, we're going to quickly draw the name of the winner of our oscilloscope, thanks to Keysight from their WAVE event back in March. This was in response to our listener survey of 2018, so if you took that survey, you were asked if you wanted to be entered to win. We had 1,250 people, all told. We had a great range of demographic data and things that people are looking for, other podcasts that they're listening to. We are actually going to send out some of the summary of this information to the newsletter. So if you want to see it, sign up for the newsletter. But our winner is number 376, Austin Wilson. And congratulations. Thanks for taking the survey. This is the Amp Hour Podcast, released April 1st, 2018. Episode 386. An interview with Andrew Sowa. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm Andrew Sowa, KiCad artist and electrical engineer who specializes in LED lighting.
KiCad artist. I did not see that one coming, I gotta say. Welcome, Andrew. How you doing?
Pretty good. That's my what I'm most infamous for nowadays.
Okay.
Rolling with that.
KiCad artist. I love it. That's great, man. Well, so tell us about your KiCad. Well, maybe actually let's start with the other stuff first. So, what's your backstory? How do we know each other?
Yes. So I'm an electrical engineer. During my day job, I create LED light fixtures, decorative lighting, and then on the side, I've been doing other projects in KiCad. So I have a few, two old crowdfunding projects that I've done. One to do dry aged meat in your home fridge. Another is an LED light to grow plants in your house. And then, besides that, I've written for a Supply Frame Hardware blog, do PCB art, and then also am going to do some KiCad talks at Teardown for Crowd Supply, and have a hack chat coming up for Hackaday.io on April 20th.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good. So, well, I guess let's talk about the art stuff to start with, because it seems like that's the most relevant here. How did you get started doing all this stuff? I mean, yeah.
I got started, basically, I was working on one of my crowdfunding campaigns. It was probably, 1:30 in the morning. Probably been doing layout for a few hours. And just wanted to do something different before I went to bed. Reading Hackaday, I saw the bench off book and kind of had the idea to make that into a PCB, since it was, there was, limited amount of colors, and kind of started a whole process for making photos into PCBs. So it was probably an hour at 2 in the morning, and it kind of blew up from there.
Okay, that's not bad. And so, so this is something that people have been doing in lots of, not just KiCad, obviously. People that they do this in Eagle and Altium and everything else, right? But kind of like FR4 and PCBs in general as an art form. What else is out there? I mean, like, why is this a thing now, I guess?
I think Badge Life probably is what blew it up a lot, but I mean, people have been doing art in PCBs for, a long time. You'll randomly see different stuff embedded on the silk screen. That's really common when you do teardowns. And I think people are just kind of thinking outside the box a little bit, and saying, we have this platform that has high resolution imagery that's sort of like silk screening for t-shirts. So, why not take that process and, have a little more fun with it, do complex curves, make it a little more interesting than your simple square.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that it has kind of changed with the advent of like lower cost PCBs in general, right? I mean, it's just as like a large scale printing mechanism, you can get stuff pretty cheap in multiple material types and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I mean, you pay by the square inch, so if you have extra space, it's
some
free
places
to
you do, yeah. Yeah, and I remember. Well, so people may remember Sar from Boldport's been on the show as well, and he's doing that kind of stuff as well. Do Do you know SAR? Are you doing any of his what's it called? Boldport.
Yeah, I'm a Bullport member, so have a couple kits. I've been building them. I'm a little backlogged, but I've been trying to film those as I build them.
Okay.
And edit those and kind of provide some visual guides and see how he's doing it and learn some tricks from him.
Yeah, right. And I the one I specifically remember is like the first time it really clicked for me as a like PCB as an art thing was that Game of Life thing he did, or the game is life or something like that. It was like it was an actual, like, it looked like it had different sides and it was like a 3D box that he made. And that was the one where I was like, oh wow, like that is the main purpose of this thing. Yes, it did light up, but it was, it also was specifically to have like an art piece on the wall. And that was interesting.
Yeah, he definitely was, kind of probably influenced my thought process on, this being possible because I did a little, read up on him before I created my stuff.
Okay. So when you're doing this stuff, I mean, like you said, you have kind of a multicolor palette here. How would you quantify, like, and most of the things you're doing is Oshpark based, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just for simplicity's sake, let's just say things are going to be purple and white and gold, and right. I mean, like, that's an easy way to kind of narrow the conversation.
Yeah. I've just been using them. They're popular in our group of people, so it makes it a little bit easier.
Right.
But
right, knowing Drew and obviously the whole team there. We're huge fans of Oshpark here, so that's good. Okay, so we got purple and gold, and I mean, well, maybe walk us through the palette that you have there.
Basically, there's if you start from the darkest, you have purple solder mask on bare FR4. So solder mask is a little translucent. So if you put copper underneath it, it'll lighten it up a little bit. So if you remove the copper underneath there, it creates your darkest color. Next up is you has solder mask with copper underneath. So that's a little bit brighter. So that's like your second darkest color. And then your midtones, you have bare FR4, and that changes a little bit. And if you're doing 2 or 4 layers, but that's kind of like a brownish tone. And then you have your copper with gold plating, so it's a nice bright gold, really shiny. And then my brightest color would be white silk screen. So that's kind of how I think about it, is from usually from dark to light. And then occasionally, if I need to, I'll think of it like in colors to create a more, bring out some contrast. But that's, the premise is to go from those is more of a brightness scale.
Okay. Yeah, that's good thinking. Yeah. And so some of these are actually combinations then as well, right? So it's got, copper underneath FR4 or underneath solder mask or whatever. So you have to do like kind of additive, subtractive layers. How are you actually making these, going from, a JPEG or a BMP or whatever, PNG to a finished board then?
I mean, the first thing I do is mock up the design in either Inkscape or Illustrator. Inkscape is free, so it's it's nice because it's accessible, but Illustrator makes it a little easier. But
Illustrator isn't a terrible mess of free software.
Yeah, I mean, Inkscape is good, but it's more about speed.
Got it.
Time. When you get busy, time is important. So it's a little faster to do it in Illustrator. But mock up.
I'm going to throw in for Sketch as well. I don't know if you've ever used that program.
I have not. No, but
so it's like it's meant for web designers, but it's like a really simplified. It's Mac only, unfortunately, but it's a simplified version of Illustrator, pretty much. And I've gotten much faster with that. It's just like kind of removes all the cruft that I don't know how to use in Illustrator.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it has image to SVG function, that's the main thing I use. So I'll import an image, picture of someone or a picture of an object, and then it'll render it down into a couple different colors. So there's a few options. So if I want to do it the easy way, there's render picture into 6 colors. I'll take those 6 colors and pick which one I want the different layers. So which one's going to be purple, which one's going to be brown, which one's gold, which one's white, and then see how that looks. If that doesn't turn out well, I'll then go to render down into maybe 16 different colors, and then I'll manually go and decide which one I want, different colors, combine layers, and that's a little more complicated process, takes a little longer. But that's kind of the first step, is getting a SVG file that has all the different colors laid out in their respective positions.
Got it. Are you ever doing anything with like cross hatches or anything like that in copper to change the?
I've been experimenting with that. I have a project I'm doing that I want to do backlit. So I have a test panel where I did some crosshatch type things. So I have a new project that it's not done yet, but I'm gonna try to add some layers by doing backlighting through the FR4, since
oh cool, okay,
kind of translucent, and you could get different colors through that. So I'm gonna have kind of build layers on the other side, so I could have shadowing through that backlight.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. And you had mentioned too that I was surprised actually by the 4-layer thing. So is that actually something you've been doing, or?
This one's just gonna be 2 layers. The only 4-layer stuff I've done was I had some made because it's a little just to test out the different colors. Because 2 layers and 4 layers use different fiberglass material, so there's little different colors, and played around a little bit with UV fluorescent. So that's, they do fluoresce under UV light. So then they
really?
do it a little differently. So if you want to play with UV, that's also an option.
Cool. Okay. I was actually so I guess I should ask too. Have you exported your art stuff to non-Oshpark? Even though I said we would talk about that mostly.
I have not. Just some projects that I probably will need different colors. I've been thinking about. I know Brian has done different colors on white solder mask. So that's something.
Brian Benchoff, you're saying, for for badges and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
okay.
I've been thinking about talking to some people about doing UV printing. So maybe getting a white solder mask and actually printing full color. It gets a little bit away from kind of the the simple nature of working within the constraints of the medium.
Right.
It kind of just becomes a poster at one point, but
he is an artist, folks. You hear that? The constraints of the medium. That sounds very artsy.
Yeah, but I mean,
how long until your stuff goes up at Arts Institute here in Chicago? I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. Is PCB art up in the galleries?
There's people from the Art Institute at the Hackerspace, so there's
really?
a little bit of relationship there. Yeah,
okay. Which hackerspace is this?
I'm a member of Pumping Station 1 here in Chicago, and there's people from the Art Institute of Chicago help kind of build and develop that space as well. So the Art Institute has a really good fabrication lab, and people saw that, and kind of people from there helped build PS1 because they kind of, story goes is they kind of missed some of those features at the Art Institute. So
like the shop didn't have enough of the right stuff. It was more of a
well, they graduated and they didn't have access to the shop anymore.
So, like that. I see. Okay.
So they kind of, we need to build this so we have the ability to access equipment again.
Yep.
So I didn't even realize how big that was until Magenta from the Supply Frame Lab did a tour.
I was going to mention, this is someone that I used to work with as well, and it was a nice walkthrough there. I'll link that down below. I didn't realize there was a lot of Art Institute people there. So at the Pumping Station 1. So yeah, the reason I asked though too is that when you're exporting this stuff, so like a lot of the PCB fabs, like an Oshpark, or even like like I use like all PCB sometimes as well. They kind of remove the whole traditional method of like needing to do stack up and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you ever are speccing out PCBs open loop like a lot of the old school fab houses require.
I done some stack up notes for my crowdfunding projects. So I went through more, got quoted out from Chinese assemblers and manufacturers. And I've used some other board house services in China for different projects. So I'm familiar with, having to spec out your layer heights, your board, your board heights, and what finishes you want.
Right. So how are you doing? That's what I was going to get towards. Is like, how are you doing that? Because I had to do that recently as well, and I was kind of not shocked, but there's just not much info out there about it.
I mean, a lot of this is kind of you, I guess, take a leap and hopefully everything works out. I mean, you try to find info and,
Right.
I mean, a lot of us are learning as we go. I do some of this for work, but I also don't have, I was the only electrical engineer in my day job for 2 years. So I kind of had to figure everything out myself. So some of it is, reading blogs and YouTube videos and things like that. And some of it is just kind of, doing it, and hopefully it works, and if it doesn't, fixing it. So
Yeah.
the not being afraid to fail, and hopefully having the money to fail is kind of important.
Yep. I found that so I was interfacing with the board house, and they kept asking like, oh, like a fab drawing, blah blah blah, and I'd been prototyping with like an online service, whatever, no big deal, and it's just like a standard thing, and eventually what they did is they're like, here's an example. I was like, oh. And so I think that might be a good piece of advice for people too, is like, if you're working with the board house, be like, what format would you like this in? You know what I mean? Like, be like, it's basically a subtle way of asking, can I copy your work? I would love to spec things out for you. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I mean, I'm sure that helps them out as well, because everyone has their own
exactly
flavor of what they want information in.
Right.
And a lot of this gets back to just people manually inputting things more than you probably would think there would be. So they probably would be happy to give you that format, because that's probably the easiest way for them to deal with the information.
Exactly, because at a certain point they're going to have to put it into some system that they have, right?
Yeah, everyone likes to, I've made designs for work that I've gotten fabricated, and everyone wants to put it in their design tool in their format. So I may build it in KiCad, but they'll take it and redo it in Altium or whatever.
Yep. Right.
Whatever software they're comfortable with.
Well, that was another thing too, is that like in Altium, like it has like a stack up tool. Like a lot of the traditional tools have these stack up tools, and like none of the like KiCad doesn't really have that. I don't think Eagle has that. But at the end of the day, what they really want to know is like, okay, so you're gonna have like a core part of your PCB, and then you're gonna have a prepreg, and then you're gonna have dielectric material, then you're gonna have a copper thickness, then another. If it's a 4-layer, you're gonna have another layer of dielectric, and then like how tall should the solder mask be? Like how like all of these. It's mostly just like thicknesses, material types, and all that other stuff that's in there. And I was surprised that I couldn't find many examples of that, but eventually I just ended up making a table in KiCad, and it worked out fine.
I mean, Excel sheets work well. Word documents, like that's, if you're sending over your BOM to get assembled, a nice Excel sheet with notes is important. You could put stack up information in there. If you want to do PDF drawings, you could put notes there. But it's kind of whatever you want to do sometimes, but just make sure you make it as readable as possible.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing too is that like, I'm pulling up a drawing right now to see the other stuff that I put in there after I copy this stuff. But a lot of it was like IPC spec stuff, right? So like plating per IPC 4552, which was totally a copied thing. I don't know what that means. You know what I mean? Like I know that like these are things I probably should know, but like I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, usually I'm not an IPC expert.
Right.
I kind of rely, oftentimes I rely on some other people to kind of make sure that works out well.
Right.
Safety standards and all that, UL could get a little complicated. So we have a whole, division that handles that. And
in your day job?
Yeah. Usually like a CM also will have, depending on the size of the CM, they'll have people that do the compliance side of things.
Right. Right. It's not like I want to skip this stuff. No one really wants to. It's not we're like, oh well, make it as least safe as possible. It's just like, I don't know the language yet, so yeah. Well, cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your day job if you're able to. I mean, like, what kind of designs do you make in there?
So we do decorative lighting. So it's kind of how I got into doing some weird PCB stuff is that decorative lighting is odd shapes. So utilizing LEDs to make new and unique different light fixtures. So it's no longer a socket and a bulb. It could be a circle, arcs, curves, non-square PCBs is kind of an advantage to having LED lighting. So we definitely have been using that to our advantage.
Okay. And so what are the kinds of people that you're interfacing with, I suppose? Is it like industrial designers then, or mechanical designers, or who are you actually making these PCBs for?
Kind of all of the above. So designers will sketch out different styles and things like that, and then I'll have to interface with the mechanical engineers and the design engineers to kind of figure out how to make a reality. So, I have a lot of kind of bosses in a sense, but
I have 8 bosses, Bob.
yeah, I mean, I probably have 12 different people who ask me to do things. So
wow. Okay.
And then so that's on the U.S. side, and then also interface with manufacturers. So dealing with issues and just kind of education for our CMs. So we'll do research here in the States and learn a few tips and tricks and things that you should do, shouldn't do, and then conveying that information to our manufacturers overseas, and kind of just guiding the design and then helping them when problems happen.
And I mean, are you over there? Are you doing that? Are you like on site with them, or is it more like kind of you just kind of let it go and hope it comes back okay?
There's people on site. It's mostly remote for me. I have been, I've visited China twice so far, so I've had some one-on-one time with the factories and saw their facilities, but I'm not always the one going over there, but we always do have someone going over there, and that tends to be a very important aspect of this whole process.
Right. Yeah, kind of knowledge transfer, making sure everything's understood. What about, I mean, the actual designing of these circuits? Is it pretty standard from fixture to fixture then? It's kind of reworking where the placement of LEDs is, or the drive circuit's changing, or is that off-the-shelf stuff? What's the deal with that? It's
mostly, well, initially things were a little more complicated than they are now, but I've been driving towards standardization. Because you have to match a power supply to the LED board, those are kind of like a paired circuit. So we get a driver from a driver manufacturer, and we often will make custom PCBs with LEDs on them. So to make that a little more simple, we've been driving towards standardization. So you have 12 LEDs in series, maybe 4 in parallel, 4 of those strings in parallel, and then a lot of times it's just relaying out those into unique shapes and things like that.
Got it. Okay. Is there a lot of like, because I'm looking at a lot of multicolor projects now too, and I wonder about that. Is it mostly you pick a color temperature and you're off to the races, or is there color matching as well, and like moving into the multicolor space?
Multicolor gets pretty complicated fast. Since LEDs are a bin product, basically they grow LEDs as a semiconductor, put phosphor on it, and that has a yield rate. So one of the tricks of making LEDs is making sure those colors are very consistent. So just getting color consistency from one color temperature to match up was a big challenge, especially in the beginning of LED days. So that's been mostly figured out. So, if you get 3000 Kelvin LED, mostly those will all look the same. Now people have been starting to do multiple Kelvin type fixtures, so warm dimming, color tuning, and that also has challenges. The challenges for that mainly is that when you mix those two, it moves away from what like an incandescent or halogen would look like. It's called it gets a little complicated, but it's called the black body curve, which is your incandescent halogen fixtures. And when you mix two different LED colors, you typically will be moving away from that curve in between those. So you could get some color discrepancies there.
Okay. And that's stuff that I'm guessing you have lighting designers know that stuff too, huh?
Yeah, lighting designers, they're very aware of that. And once you're dealing with this stuff from day to day, your perception changes. So like now I can see every restaurant that has two different color bulbs. You notice it quickly.
That's got to be
you deal with it all the time. So yeah, I mean, just like anything, if you deal with music stuff, you hear every click and pop. If you deal,
Right.
You get hypersensitive.
Let me tell you, listening to podcasts for me is pretty rough sometimes. I'm like, oh,
It's
that's some background noise.
it's just because your podcast is so amazing that
Sure,
everything
yeah,
else-
right.
There's some technologies that are able to do that really well, but they use actually 5 primary colors of LEDs.
Oh, really?
To mix those.
Okay.
So they'll use like a lime green, a blue, a red, amber. I forgot the specific colors, but
And when you say
that
are
gets
these
rid-
tinted whites or are these actual like full, like a blue
actually
blue?
full a blue. Like if you looked at it, it would be like a yellowish green.
Okay.
One would be a red, and then they do this whole complex mixing process so that stays on the black body as it changes color.
Wow. Okay. And then what? So you'd have like a controller for each individual color, then, and then you can kind of tune those up and down.
Yeah, they have a driver for each color, and then and that specific company calibrates every single emitter, so they'll put it in an integrating sphere and calibrate each device.
Holy crap!
Because it is bin product.
Yeah.
So
So like the final product is binned versus the source material being binned.
Well, yeah. So like each LED is bin, but it's only so good how close you get it.
Oh, okay.
So they actually calibrate every single final product like you would calibrate test equipment. So that ends up being pretty.
I was gonna
pricey.
say, yeah. That sounds like that's the stuff that like the really expensive designers. And maybe that's a good thing to talk about too. Is like you work on stuff that's consumer, but all the way through to like industrial, but also like designer style. Is that right?
Yeah. So I don't do like troffer stuff. So troffer would be like your you drop in like a grid ceiling, and it's basically you're main lighting an entire office building. But I do kind of your normal residential lighting that everyone has in their house to like very high end, decorative commercial to very high end homes.
Right.
So multi-million-dollar homes down to track houses. So I run the whole gamut.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that from a company perspective, they would want to have like the margin has got to be at the high end, right? You can charge more per light. The material cost goes down, but you get more just because it's a fancier design and kind of the art pieces in there.
Yeah. A lot of it is a lot of the cost comes from the design and materials, so finishes, stuff like that. LED pricing for the electronics has really been going down over the years pretty fast. So that's a pretty commoditized industry at this point. So in the high-end stuff, a lot of your prices is back to just finishes and things like that.
Got it. And so these power supplies that you're putting into, are these kind of like you're just kind of speccing them in? You're like, I have a string voltage of 48 volts or whatever, and just you got to drive that. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. So we typically don't try to do custom power supplies. There's a ton of LED driver companies, and they have stock products. So kind of.
And I guess when you're speccing that stuff in too, is it a voltage spec or current spec? I mean, like how much control do you have over the string itself?
So it's you need to do both. So basically, you have a voltage window. So there's a rough standard for most things around 36 volts. Light fixtures, a lot of them will run on 36 volts. But since it's an LED doesn't have, one voltage, it has a voltage over different, as you change current, the voltage will change. As you change temperature, the voltage will change. So you kind of spec out a window. So a 36 volt LED driver will probably be like 30 to 40 or 32 to 40 volts. And then you have different drive currents. So,
got it. And that's actually what the dim. If there's any dimming, it'll actually change currents through the LED, right?
Yeah. So most dimming is current control dimming. Some do PWM, some do a hybrid of both. So it depends on how low you want to go, and kind of how fancy you want to get.
Well, and if there's flicker too, I'm guessing, right? Because I have a PWM set up here, and it's like it looks fine. My eyes are fine with it, but I turn a camera towards it, and it's like, oh, look, it's a strobe light.
Yeah, there's definitely specs for flicker and That's been like in the past 2 years. That's been some new regulations that got put in place. Title 24
Oh, really? Okay.
is a California regulation that ends up affecting the rest of the country because people don't want to make multiple SKUs.
Is that like for epilepsy though? Like, is it like a regulation for safety, or is it just for a general good taste?
I would say it's both. There is epilepsy isn't as big of a problem because that's kind of below 70 hertz or so is when you get into epileptic issues.
Okay.
This is more in the like 100 to 120 hertz. So basically, when you rectify 60 hertz in the U.S. or 50 hertz somewhere else, you get 100, 120 hertz flicker. If you don't do any energy storage, those LEDs will turn on and off, and that could be distracting, possibly cause headaches, things like that.
Got it. Okay.
There is some IEEE is doing research on that. So yeah, there's a couple different standards bodies that are regulating that flicker and things like that.
Well, so obviously this is your day job, but then you decided to do this at home on the weekend. So tell us about Faust and your personal lighting project.
So that was I started that about a year and a half ago. So me and an old coworker, we wanted to kind of do a project on the side. We worked on a Kickstarter before that, and we just kind of want to dive more into it. Basically when you're your own boss, no one can tell you not to do something. So it's a good way to learn things.
You get to pick whatever 16 hours you want to work, right?
Yeah. Well, on top of the 40, so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yes, sleep is optional some days, but.
I did. I was gonna say I did see you. So Andrew was also at M Hub once in a while, and I saw him. I'd be like 8:30 p.m. I'd be like leaving work, and he'd be walking in. I'd be like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, the night shift sometimes.
Yeah, right.
I mean that gets. I've been taking a break after that project because burnout happens. That's a thing. But
it does. Yes, definitely.
The point of that project was basically we both knew how to make light fixtures, and a lot of the light fixtures for growing plants basically were pretty ugly and weren't designed well. So we wanted to make something that would has like kind of the appeal of regular decorative light, but also is tailored to growing plants inside. Hydroponics.
And so is this meant as like
starting.
a quasi like it's meant to be like you're growing your plants, but it's like out in the open. You don't have like a grow room or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons why we did that. One, that's what we knew. We knew how to make decorative lighting, and we wanted to apply our area of expertise into a new market. So it's a possible opportunity. Another thing is that we were two people and we didn't have scale and volume, so we knew pricing was going to be difficult. So if you try to provide some value in design, that could help you loosen some burden on providing value off your just BOM materials and things like that.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, is that people. I mean, well, especially if you're selling into like a market where they need a bunch of lights, I'm sure that there's a lot of cost pressures to like get your cost per device down. So it's kind of more targeting like a low volume market there, right?
Yeah, if we couldn't go straight into industrial lighting because we just, we didn't have money to do something at that scale. So we couldn't compete with that.
This was your Tesla Roadster instead of going straight to the Tesla 3. You're saying?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, you made that analogy, not me, but I wouldn't call it a roaster, but
right.
It's a little more simpler than that.
I just meant that it's expensive and you're not making many of them.
Yeah. And then since we weren't making many of them, we actually could do stuff. We use wood in the product, so wood's not great for large scale manufacturing, but since we're not going to be making a ton of these, we kind of try to use that as an advantage to differentiate ourselves, because we're going to do smaller scale. So take the upside of the smaller scale when we can, and use the small company advantages.
So I keep saying Kickstarter. This is actually on Indiegogo though, huh?
Yeah. So that's Indiegogo Kickstarter. That's a kind of a longer story of, which one's better and why you should do which one. But I guess the simple thing is like they reached out to us and provided us some support. So yeah, we went with that platform. But
and this is the what why did they reach out for? I mean, like, I guess I don't know, like, were they like recruiting recruiting crowdfunding campaigns?
Yeah, they have a team that tries to actively get people to go onto the site. So yeah, we released like a press release thing. There's like press release websites you could put stuff out there, and then through that they got in contact with us and provided us like a point of contact to if we had any questions and some suggestions and things like that.
So didn't end up funding though,
huh? Did not fund, no. I would probably say it ended up being too expensive. A lot of the feedback we got was, once you start developing something, you start in a certain period of time, and then what happens in that year or 2 year developing in it is kind of out of your control. So, and you don't really know what everyone else is doing.
Right.
So while we were developing it, we kind of saw a bunch of products to come on Amazon that were much cheaper.
Right.
We got a couple of them, and they definitely weren't like UL certified. They seemed pretty unsafe. But if you don't know that,
if it hit the market of like what people were, if they just cared about lighting plants, right? I mean, well, like to put it completely out there, it doesn't look like this is a product that is targeted at the burgeoning pot growing market.
No, we didn't. Yeah, we purposely didn't try to go there because
right.
One, it's not, that's not an expertise I have. And
sure, buddy.
I figured there'd be more competition there. Still not legal in Illinois. So.
Right. No, it's an interesting thing too, and I have seen some products for it. I mean, it's interesting as well. Speaking about, it's kind of like on that edge of, what's allowed to be worked on. Like so we're both at MHub sometimes. Like MHub has like limits on like what you're allowed to work on. Like you're not allowed to work on weapons or like just kind of controversial type things in the first place. So like weapons or non-commercial things or drug-based paraphernalia, you're not allowed to work on there. But the same thing, like hackerspaces usually kind of put those rules in place too. And like lighting, you could say, but it is like right on the edge there, right? I mean, it's who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago actually has a couple different organizations that are doing indoor growing of herbs and vegetables and plants.
Yeah.
I mean, their whole purpose is to kind of create a different way to alter the food source. So there's some decent sized aquaponics building here. There's a place out in Northwest Indiana outside the city that has a couple different contracts with cafeterias that's growing all indoors. So there's definitely, it's not as popular, or I guess not as well known, but there's plenty of legitimate usage for indoor lighting that could help ease the burden of food supply.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, I'll give a call back to that same article I keep talking about, but there was an amazing National Geographic article about it was about the Netherlands and their indoor growing stuff and their research stuff there. But it's, I mean, like it is a scale problem, right? It's like making, thinking about growing one plant is one light, but if every plant needs its own light, you got to basically replicate the sun. It's pretty tough,
Well, one thing we wanted to play with was the light we made a couple different versions, but one had 3 different channels. So one, I had this conversation with people, is you don't necessarily have to replicate the sun, because when you have control of everything, you could possibly make something that's better in the sense than the sun, because plants happen to grow with this free source of energy, but it doesn't mean that is the most efficient way to do it,
right?
And doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. So
right, you're talking about like light absorption in the spectrum and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's an area of research where people are working on, is tuning light spectrums to optimize growth of the plants, optimize energy transfer, and then potentially optimize, vitamins and what, kind of what they produce.
Right. Yeah.
And if you mix that with like CRISPR and all these gene editing stuff,
Oh, really? Wow.
You could, I mean, that, that's an option, and you could get some pretty interesting results. And so, I'm not sure what's going to end up in the future of that, but
no, that's cool for research though. And like you said, if you're tuning the light, then it's interesting. It's you want to have control over that stuff too, and just buying straight, red, blue, white, whatever those standard grow lights are. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so I've talked to some people a little bit from the Field Museum, so been trying to get in touch with more people, more scientists, and seeing if I could build. The light didn't work out for like as a public device, but potentially in the future I may be able to help some scientists create tunable light fixtures for research purposes, which would be interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. It sounds like it's like you said, it's the commercial standpoint is not really there, but at the everything else there could be. I guess at the end of the day too, like this was a crowdfunding campaign, and it kind of did its job, right? It's like, well, it didn't work out as you didn't go all the way through it, but it's almost better than getting all the way to the end and like building this thing on your own and being like, hey, I've got a stock room full of stuff and nobody's buying it. So,
I try to look at these projects as you always have to have ulterior motives of what you want to get out of it. So either you want to learn something, you want to put it on a resume, you think you could get maybe some contract work out of it, or you basically just want to put yourself in an industry where you want to learn more, so people could come find you. So I think you have to think of these projects as kind of multiple ways to success, because it is hard to just fund a crowdfunding campaign, and then it's even harder to make that its own independent business. So I think if you're relying on that, you're going to set yourself up for failure before you start.
Yep. Cool. Well, it sounds like you've gotten more, obviously more PCB experience from this, and it sounds like you'll also be giving some workshops about it, right? So you're going to be teaching others the way of PCB art and lighting and stuff like that. So tell us about that.
So I'm going to be doing a workshop and presentation at Teardown for Crowd Supply. It's May 11th through the 13th. Okay. So I don't have that exactly finalized yet, but I learned a few tricks throughout the way the past 3 or 4 years. I've been working with KiCad, so I wanted to teach other people those tricks.
Cool.
So basically, things like doing non-square board outlines, complex curves, making different antenna designs, doing odd fill zones, and a couple other kind of a little bit hacks to get KiCad to do more than what you think it could do.
Okay, cool. And tell us more. What is Teardown actually? I had not heard about. I'd heard about it, but not. Yeah, let's get that out there too.
I believe this is his first year. It's happening. But it's basically a conference that's put on by Crowd Supply. Bunny is going to be the keynote speaker. Just a place to. I think it's gonna be a little more casual, but a place to learn things. Have a bunch of smart people hang out with each other, and hopefully, inspire each other and teach each other. So,
yeah, I think there'll be a lot of.
I don't know the exact details.
A lot of names that are recognizable there. So Bunny will be there. I think Joe Grand might be there.
Joe is gonna. Yeah, he is also gonna give a talk.
Right.
So I'm not sure. The speaker list isn't out yet,
okay.
But that should be coming out shortly. But
yep. And then of course Josh, who runs Crowd Supply. These are all past guests, and we'll link all of these past shows as well. So a good cadre of speakers there that will be a recognizable name. So it's up in Portland, you said?
Yeah, it's in Portland. Crowd Supply is based out of Portland, so that's why it's over there. And there's details on their site if you look up Crowd Supply Teardown, where it's at, times, accommodations, all
cool.
that.
Yeah, I will definitely link that stuff in. Cool. And that is May, you said. Okay, so that's right around.
Yeah, mid-May.
May's got a bunch of stuff going on. I think that's the. So I said there's PyCon, there's this thing, there's Maker Faire like usual. There's one or two other things too. I'm not going to any of those.
So. Yeah. I have to be selective on what I want to go to because there's just too much to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I just found out my proposal. I will be giving a talk on KiCad as well at Tour Camp up in June up in Pacific Northwest as well. So I'll be asking you questions on your workshop experience. So will you actually be doing a workshop or will you be giving a talk?
So right now I think I'm going to do both. So the talk is going to be more about tips and tricks about doing complex shapes and how to get KiCad to do that. And then I also want to do a workshop on the PCB art stuff. So you bring in your own picture of what you want to make a PCB, and we'll go through the process of that whole process, and hopefully you will have PCB art of the picture you want or the image you want by the end of that workshop.
Yeah, that's a good idea, right? Because then it's accessible, and it's also like that's something you can have by the end. Do you have anything like that online yet, or no?
I have a blog post where I wrote about the process. I've been working on getting videos out on it. I have a time lapse of when I just did, but I don't have like a detailed explanation yet. But I will be we'll be doing KiCad videos on my YouTube channel that I had for a long time, but I'm finally going to be uploading videos. And then, the first one will be PCB art stuff, and then I'll be also doing other KiCad tips and tricks and some surface mount soldering stuff. And
cool.
So hopefully we'll have time to get all this done.
What about, so you said you were selective in where else are you going? Where else are you going to be at this year for conferences and stuff?
So I'm going to be at the Open Source Hardware Summit at MIT, and then the Hackaday Super Conference as well.
Cool.
So Super Conference, I went for the first time last year, had a really good time. So definitely going to make it back there. And then it will be my first time at the Open Source Hardware Summit.
Yeah. I didn't. That was just announced, not just announced, but it was recently announced. I don't think we've talked about it on here, but that is up in September in Boston.
August or September. I forgot the exact dates now, but fall area.
Oh, here we go. 2018 Oshwa.org. Yeah. September 27th at MIT. All right. Well, that's good. We'll have links for all this stuff, like I said, as well. I mean, it's always tough, right? I mean, like you said, it's you got to pick and choose. I mean, like you're not going for work, right? You're going for you, and it's tough to figure out which ones to go to.
Yeah. I got to take vacation days, and fortunately, the day job supports some of this, and I have the opportunity to go to all these things. But it's definitely hard. Everything costs money, and everything is time. So. It's a privilege to be able to go to all these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's good too, like to, like you bundle together, right? If you have, other people going, finding like, a shared house or something. Like Airbnb has always been good for that stuff, and just getting a big house, splitting the costs if you need to. That really helps a lot, in my opinion. You're not going to DEF CON though.
No, I am not. I probably should.
I was gonna say, like, this, with all your art stuff, the whole badge life thing is something that I stumbled into last year, and boy, it's crazy.
So I will likely be at DEF CON in spirit, because hopefully I think I'm going to be helping some people out with badges. But I don't know quite yet. But so I'm trying to attend DEF CON via my work, but I have no plans to go right now.
Well, so tell us what I keep saying badge life, and you keep saying badge life. What does that actually mean?
I mean, I don't know if there's a definition, but basically, people have been getting more and more extreme with making custom hardware for conference badges. So, DEF CON is one of the bigger ones that I see people making stuff for, but, and then Super Conference has one, but, taking, more PCB art and adding functionality, puzzles, lights, displays, and putting a battery in and putting it on your neck and walking around and
right.
Playing
Which
with
sounds
them.
like it sounds very simple. Like I was trying to explain it to someone at the meetup that you and I were at last week, and he's just like, "What? I don't get it." And I agree with that, right? It's like, why do you do this stuff? Why is this such a thing? But I think it's a relic of past DEF CONs and past other, like a lot of conferences use this as like as a centering force, like a thing to hack on or whatever. And especially when it's groups that aren't used to making their own electronics, then there's even more excitement about it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people who make badges don't make hardware in their day job, so they're looking for an outlet for their passion, and they put a lot of time into making these badges. And I mean, one reason I haven't been doing badge like stuff or more functional designs is that I've been working on crowdfunding campaigns, and it's a lot easier just to make something that doesn't do anything that looks pretty than it is to make something that looks pretty and does a bunch of interesting things. So now that my schedule's freed up a little bit, I want to get more into that cross between functional and artistic design.
Yeah, there was 2 really good talks. Whitney Merrill, I think Whitney might have come up with Badge Life, or she runs the forum for it or whatever. But so Whitney gave a really good talk, and Carrie gave a really good talk about these, and I'll post both of those links as well. But basically, yeah, I mean, like Carrie is a firmware designer, Whitney is a lawyer, and they're both kind of discovering the hard. It's interesting, like seeing the hardware process from other people's eyes as well, right? Of like, oh, and then I had to deal with the parts, and it's like, yep, saw that one coming. And it's like, but it's also like it's more people kind of getting into the electronics design world through that medium, and that's great,
I mean, one good thing is everyone has stories now and pain points, and I screw this up, so you shouldn't screw it up. So I've been seeing more and more people write about their challenges with making badges, which creates a more interesting story than like, this widget I can't talk about because it's for my job, screwed up, and I don't want to get fired. So it's a good source for educational material.
Right, exactly. Because, well, and I've talked about like ego in the past, like there is just like that engineering ego, not necessarily ego in a negative way either. It's just like, this is my job. I can't like talk about messing all this stuff up because then it might put my future career prospects in jeopardy. But like you're saying, now that people are willing to talk about it, there's just more discussion points around it. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't even think it's more about future job. It's just that companies don't want to admit they make mistakes and try to hide those as much as possible. So people really buy into making a black box, and they want the consumer to think that's a black box. So a lot of those challenges and struggles get hidden. And because you don't own the company, and like you don't know, it's kind of awkward to have that conversation with your boss to say, can I talk about all the things that got messed up.
Another thing that we might have been in legal jeopardy for, can I talk about that?
Yeah, if you have to get lawyers' approvals, it usually is more difficult than it's worth.
That's a good point. Cool. Well, so you've got all this. You got the PCB art stuff and the showcases on the road. Are you actively working on any badges you're allowed to talk about, or no?
I'm not working on any badges right now. I started a Hackaday Prize project. I didn't make the page yet, but I've been doing some preliminary work on that. Cool. So I have a design that I want to do for this year's Hackaday Prize that I could talk about if you want.
Sure. Yeah. What's going on with
that? So basically, I want to, there's bus stops around Chicago here, and some of them have the bus times, and there is also a bus tracker app, but the app's not that great, and you need internet to interface with it. So I want to try to make something that's as low cost as I could get it to do bus tracking that you could basically slap onto bus stops, and you as a person with approvals of whatever you need to from local government, slap on a bus tracker, and then provide that kind of as like a service for your local bus stop. Uh-huh. So say I take the bus every day, I can make a bus tracker for, I don't know, $50. It's important to me. I bolt it to a pole. Then everyone else who uses that bus stop also has access to bus tracking information at that stop.
Got it.
And if you get a couple people to do that, it expands that that network.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea. I like that. Yeah, and actually, one of the problem statements that you had about that you told me about was interesting too. Of like the people in low cost areas don't even have a phone that works all the time, right? So like in terms of a thing that gets them to work and understanding when a bus shows up, like they might not have mobile access to even check the bus schedule. That was something I hadn't even thought about. Of course, it's a thing, but yeah.
Yeah, part of the way this idea came about is a few different things. It's one, you work at Hologram, so I'm around cellular stuff now. Drew's been doing a lot of e-ink stuff, and I believe there's some other people in I believe Portland who've been doing e-ink stuff, so the price of that's come down. And then I went to a talk. DePaul opened up a makerspace in downtown Chicago, the Idea Realization Lab, I believe. And one of the talks was like, how about making for lower income communities? And there was someone who was saying that people don't have, they have phones. These kids have phones, they don't have the internet.
Yeah.
So things like Uber is difficult for them. And just trying to improve transportation for people who don't have internet on the phone, be it local ride sharing, a local ride sharing app where you have a group of people come together to bring kids to a common event.
Yeah, right.
Or
right.
my version of this would be trying to get people access to better transit time information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, obviously this has been you and I both live in Chicago, and so Chicago-centric thinking here. It's like even just not being outside when it's 5 degrees, that's Fahrenheit, like that can really, it's almost a safety issue too, so.
Yeah,
but
I mean, this morning was not fun. I was walking, it was probably 37 and sleeting, so.
Sleeting, lovely.
Didn't enjoy myself.
Yeah, springtime in Chicago. Tomorrow is, I guess this episode will be released on April 1st, so yeah. April in Chicago, huh?
You didn't learn it goes from winter to summer.
Right,
yet,
right.
So.
Yep, classic. Well, what else should we know? I mean, what else should we know about you? Actually, I have a link here too. I forgot that you were on a call-in show many months ago, many years ago even.
Yeah, during my first crowdfunding campaign, I called in when that's when I started doing more and more layout.
Yeah.
So I asked a couple questions about that and completely scrapped that design. But I did learn some KiCad tricks doing that. And now I have a bunch of boards in my drawer that I don't know what to do with. But,
yes, the dead pile. I've got that too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we haven't done a call-in show, and if people are interested in doing another one, I would be interested in potentially doing one, but we have not done one in a while. I think the last time we did one, no one called in, so that was the real problem. Timing usually is the issue. So, cool. Well, any other upcoming projects or events for you?
I guess the other thing we didn't talk about is I have been writing for Supply Frame Hardware Blog,
mm-hmm.
which is now taken over by Sophie Kravitz.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been some pretty good articles going on that, and she's been trying to increase the output and quality of that. So I have a few articles there if you want to read those.
Cool.
I should be reading more. And then I'm going to start making videos. So if you want to peer pressure me into making more videos, bug me or subscribe or whatever you want to do. If you want to see it, let me know.
Right.
The more pressure I get from people to say they want it, the more likely I'm going to do it.
Got it.
It's kind of how my brain works, but.
Got it. Okay. Where can people bug you? Maybe that's a good way to end here.
Oh, yes. So Twitter is probably the easiest way.
Uh-huh.
June's PhD.
And now you have to explain your Twitter handle.
Yes, I do not have a PhD. My Twitter handle is from a nickname from college, a combination of what my brother's friends used to call me. For some reason, he used to call me Junes. No one really knows why, but it stuck because he would say it enough and loud and aggressively enough that people would always remember it. So that was kind of my college nickname. And then a friend added PhD as kind of like a joke. But
Got it.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever have a PhD, and I think that's kind of the joke, but I just realized people think I do have a PhD, so I feel a little weird about it now.
Got it. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I guess maybe you can get a PhD in life, or PhD in KiCad. How about that? You'll be the first KiCad PhD.
Are you the governing body?
Yeah, right.
KiCad
I
PhDs?
grant these things, so I doubt it, but maybe someday, All right, well, Andy, thanks for being on the show, and we appreciate it. It's been a good walk through LEDs and art and stuff like that, and I think that people will try and catch your stuff at all these different events. It'll be a good opportunity to learn, hopefully on video as well.
Yeah. I'm excited to, putting all this information out there. I've been, busy with other stuff in the past couple years, but I learned a lot and I want to share it. So hopefully people enjoy it.
All right, well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks a lot.